welcome those of you in the audience. Actually very happy. I think we all are to have members in the audience. We haven't had that in a little while, so I'd like to get back to some semblance of normalcy, so thank you for attending. We're going to open this meeting with a moment of silence unless someone wants to offer a prayer.
Lord, thanks for the privilege we have to be here tonight. Pray that you would bless this meeting, watch over us. And Lord, we just pray for our country, our state, our local government. Just pray that your will be done. Lord, I just pray again that whatever we do tonight will be pleasing to you. For us in Jesus' name we pray.
Amen. Amen. Next we have the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. All right, next we have the approval of the agenda. Mr. Hiss?
There is no additions other than what was sent out on Friday that added a couple items, but no other additions for this evening.
Those additions, see the emergency.
Yeah, those additions were the emergency ordinance, and then an item I wanted to discuss on the county administrator report regarding the CARES Act.
Okay. All right, I'll entertain a motion to approve the agenda.
So moved.
All right, you've heard the motion from Mr. Tuck to approve the agenda. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Motion carried. Next we have citizen comments. I do have one person signed up to speak for the citizen comment period, Drew Flynn.
Yep. Good evening. My name is Drew Flynn. I live at 525 Longwood Avenue, Bedford. I'll make this brief. I sent you all an email last week to address the Executive Order 61 compliance. I want to follow that up with a couple comments. I brought two items with me tonight. First off, your letter of April 28th to Governor Northam, and also I brought Executive Order 61. Today, we continue to struggle with rules and new mandates coming out of Richmond. I think at the local level, and as I stated in my email to you, that you can make a statement, perhaps a written statement to your citizens, announcing that in effect you will not, Bedford County will not enforce Executive Order 61. And starting with the Sheriff's Department, the Health Department, to the extent you have any jurisdiction over that regulating authority. But your citizens need a statement of confidence from this board, and that's what I'm asking for tonight. Thank you.
Okay. All right. Hearing none, I'll close this period and move to the consent agenda. Mr. Hiss?
Okay, there were two items this evening. Item A is consideration of a resolution approving the juvenile detention center contract with the city of Lynchburg. And then the second item is consideration of a resolution for supplemental appropriation of funds for the Bedford County School Board. So those are the two items that were in the packet with background materials.
All right, any questions? If not, I'll entertain a motion.
I have a question. On the school board, I haven't had a chance.
If we want to, if there's a possibility that it's not unanimous, then we have to remove it from the consent agenda and move it to a discussion item. And then we can discuss it, at that time. If it's going to be unanimously, normally consent agenda items are unanimously approved. That's why they're on the consent agenda. So if there's some questions, then we need to just remove that item and make it a discussion item. Is that what you would request?
Mr. Chairman, I'd request that because I've been looking over some of this, it's quite a few details in this document that I've gotten, and I'm really unclear on a lot of it. So I would like to have more time to evaluate, if that's possible.
All right, then we approved the agenda, so how do we do
I
that?
think that's a good motion to remove item 6B from the consent agenda and move that to action.
All right, so would you like to make that motion?
I'd like to make that motion, yes, sir.
All right, so there's a motion to move item 6B from the consent agenda to an action item. We can, in the interest of allowing Randy to not stay here all night, how about we make it 9A1 and then 9A will be 9A2. Okay,
Sounds good.
all right. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Any opposed? All right. So this becomes 9A1. Okay. So the other item on the consent agenda is a consideration of a resolution approving that juvenile detention contract with the city of Lynchburg. That's resolution R052620-04. I'll entertain a motion on that.
I like that motion.
All right, we've got the motion from Mrs. Parker. Yes.
One quick question. I was talking to Charlotte today, and she said she was going to be signed on tonight. Is she not signed?
She is. She
I'm
is.
here, I'm
Okay.
here,
You're not-
I'm here.
You're not doing it that quiet, I didn't know you was here. Okay, that's just checking, because she did say she was going to be.
Yeah, about 10 minutes before I made sure she was called in. She might not hear you very well if you're
You
not
might not
talking
want
to
to
her.
hear what
All right. So I'll entertain a motion on item 6A. And, oh, Mrs. Parker already approved that. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Any opposed? All right. And that passed unanimously. Next, we have the approval of the minutes from January 30th, February 10th, and February 24th. I'll entertain a motion.
Mr. Chairman, I move that we adopt the minutes from January 30th, February 10th, and February 24th, 2020.
All three?
Yes.
Any discussion? All right, all those in favor say aye. Aye. Any opposed? All right, that passed unanimously. I would request, it's a little difficult to remember all the way back to January. And I know things come up, but if we could, get them about a month or so in arrears, that would be good. Yeah, no, I appreciate that, I understand. Next, we have public hearings and presentations. This is a proclamation and recognition of National Skilled Nursing Care Week. I've signed this proclamation. Is anyone here ready to accept it?
No, nothing.
No, okay. So then should we at least approve the proclamation?
I think that would be appropriate.
All right, I'll entertain a motion to approve the proclamation for recognition of National Skilled Nursing Care Week.
So moved.
All right, Mrs. Parker makes a motion. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Any opposed? All right. I'm gonna give Charlotte an extra second right there. All right. Next we have consideration of, this is 9A1 now, consideration of a resolution supplementally appropriating funds for the Bedford County School Board, resolution R052620-06. I'll ask for a staff impromptu presentation.
Yeah, I think I'll put Mr. Hagler on the spot, and maybe he can review this briefly as to what these supplemental appropriations are. They have been approved by the school board at the most recent school board meeting, but he can provide a little bit more background of what these are for, and what they are and what they aren't.
Good evening. Typically, at the end of the year, we wait to do our supplemental appropriations, so we see how the revenues are coming in for all of our categories and our operating fund, and looking at expenses. At the last school board meeting, I presented my third quarter forecast, doing my best to project out what was going to happen between end of March until the end of the year. Based upon that, there were some supplemental appropriations, meaning we received more money in for some revenue accounts than we had budgeted. So those are the supplementals. We're requesting to spend those funds on certain items within the budget. There were some categories and some line items that were projected to come in over budget, so I applied those revenues towards those items. They're various in nature as far as where the revenues are coming from. The biggest adjustment was we had some state security grants and federal security grants that we received during the year that we applied for. So that was going to the maintenance department to buy extra security equipment that we procured during the year. So those were competitive grants that we applied for and actually were awarded during the year. You have to answer? Yes.
So it's additional revenues that you didn't budget for because you obviously can't count on getting a grant.
Some of them were the grants we did not budget for at all. There were some things that I did not budget as much as we received, and I applied that to some of the expenditure line items that were going to come in a little bit over.
Knowing that, and also understanding the current conditions and what the future holds or doesn't hold, I'm certain that you're planning as closely as you can with this money that you're spending and spending it wisely.
Yes, this is for the security grant. You had to spend it specifically for what you needed to use it for. I will say on behalf of the school board and what we've been doing because of the current situation is spending has been pulled back to allow for us to have as much carryover as we can, just plan it for the future. I will say there's a lot of uncertainty with the state for sales tax for me and also lottery funds. We received notice last week that lottery payments to the school system are going to be discontinued until the very end of June. So I will not know how much money I'm going to get from lottery funds. I'm still owed about $700,000. So I'm not going to know that to the very end of June. And sales tax is a very iffy thing. So I did my third quarter projection with two big unknowns: lottery proceeds coming from the state and sales tax. So I think we can make it through the year. We've got reserves set aside for that, unless something catastrophic comes through, where they short me $1 million or $2 million in the next 2 months. But I think we're in good shape. So we are planning that. We have pulled back on spending, on any discretionary spending, planning for such events like that.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Thank you.
All right. Any other questions? All right. Thank you. All right. After hearing that, I'll entertain a motion for item 9A1, Resolution R052620-06.
So
Right. I think Mr. Davis got you. So motion for Mr. Davis. All those in, well, no, this is when it comes to money, I guess I have to do a roll call vote, right? Yeah, okay. Mr. Davis?
yes.
Mrs. Park?
Yes.
Mr. Scott?
Yes.
Mr. Johnson?
Yes.
Mr. Tuck?
Yes.
Oh, Mrs. Bainsley?
Yes.
And the chair votes yes. Wow, I almost messed that up. I gotta remember. Of course, I had to do it. All right, pass unanimously. Next, we have a consideration of a resolution adopting and appropriating the fiscal year 21 Bedford County budget and adopting and appropriating the fiscal year 21 Bedford County School Board budget, Resolution R052620-02. Staff presentation by County Administrator Robert Hiss.
And I'm going to start by deferring to our Finance Director, Ashley Anderson, let her lead off, and I'll hit clean up as I need to.
All right, okay, can everybody hear me?
Yes.
Okay. So we have a resolution here to adopt and appropriate the fiscal year 21 county budget, which does include a general fund budget of about $112 million. As a reminder, that budget currently includes undistributed items for health insurance increases, which those will be distributed as soon as we get the final figures from open enrollment, which did conclude last week. Minimum wage increase, 45 days of early voting, and a 7-month hiring freeze. And those will all be distributed in the final budget document. This budget also includes a CIP budget of approximately $6.3 million, which has $1 million in new growth funds going to the schools. Nursing home budget of 7.4 million, solid waste budget of 3.9 million, which again, that is balanced with a $1.47 million transfer from the general fund balance. And then also the vehicle replacement fund, which is a little over $500,000, and law library, which is only about 13,000. This resolution also includes the adoption and appropriation of the school 21 fiscal year budget. We are adopting or requesting that we adopt and appropriate by fund this year instead of by category, which is something that we have done in the past. So the operating budget would be $104.5 million approximately. Nutrition fund, $4.5 million approximately. Textbook fund, $0.5 million, and then a maintenance reserve of about $0.2 million, bringing the school total budget to $109.7 million. Any questions?
Yeah, I do have a question. Sorry, let me go back to it. So operating budget is the same as fiscal year 20. But then it says Bedford County's new growth funding of $1 million designated for school CIP needs. Is that $1 million in new monies to CIP?
No, it's $500,000 in new money, but it's $500,000 from last year as well, so $1 million in total.
But I thought we were up to 1.5 now.
Yeah, so this year's 1 point.
Yeah, I think you and I spoke about that the other day, and it's $1 million. I think I was mistaken when you and I were talking the other day.
So just this past year was
Yep.
This past year was the first year?
Yes, sir.
Wow. Okay, I thought we were already. I thought we were literally at the year 3 now. So this is year 2. Okay. All right.
Okay.
Yeah, I mean, the only other comments I have is just that from a revenue side, we did take a much more conservative stance in terms of kind of those point of sale taxes, like meals tax, lodging tax, sales tax. We were, before coronavirus hit, we were well on our way to exceeding the budget for this year, and we were looking at projections for next year. We had to really ratchet those back considerably, not necessarily for decreasing in those revenues, but we did not budget for any increases in those revenues. We did reduce spending in a good number of our departments. In fact, I did a little counting the other day. We have basically 54 or 55 different divisions that we account for, that we have accounting, that we organize the budget around. And 40% of those, almost half of those, realized some sort of budget reduction in this year's budget. And that's spread out throughout a wide variety of departments. And the other ones who didn't are certainly less than 2% increases, and they're in the 1% to 2% range. And most of those are due to contracts and other expenditures that we don't really have much of a choice over that may have been due for this year. We'll talk about this in one of our next agenda items, but the Comprehensive Services Act is a big budget issue. It's a budget issue for this year, and it's a budget issue for next year. So even before the coronavirus hit, in terms of the solid waste transfer, the CSA expenses, and we were already going to have a fairly challenging budget for FY21 regardless. There's no pay raises in this budget. In fact, with the counties picked up a good share, a significant share of the health insurance increase, which is great. I know the employees appreciate that, but at the end of the day, employees will be taking home less money because there are some premium increases with our health insurance. But still, it could have been worse if the county did not pick up a good share of that increase with the health insurance. And our CIP has been scaled back a little bit, compared to what it has been in past years. Again, projecting forward with the impacts of the coronavirus and what those might have on our budget, we scaled back the CIP, not significantly, but it is a scaled back version of a CIP compared to what we've been able to spend the last couple of years. So it's, I guess the theme going forward is that, we're going to have to continue to evaluate this budget, as the summer and fall months come along and see if we need to make any other adjustments. I hope we don't, and that things will get open and spending will start up and our revenues will, meet what we hope they will. But if they don't, then we may be having some budget discussions, sooner rather than later. So.
Okay. Any other questions for staff? All right. Any discussion? Thank you. All right, I'll entertain a motion.
Mr. Chairman, I move that we adopt resolution R052620-02.
You've heard the motion from Mr. Tuck. I'm going to do a roll call vote. Mr. Tuck?
Yes.
Mr. Johnson?
Yes.
Mr. Scott?
Yes.
Mr. Davis?
Yes.
Mrs. Bainsley?
Yes.
Mrs. Parker?
Yes.
And the chair votes yes. Motion carried 7-0. Next, we have a consideration of a resolution requesting a supplemental appropriation for the Children's Services Act, Resolution R 052620-05. Staff presentation, Ashley Anderson. So Ashley's knew this coming up.
So, of course, we all know CSA has been a hot topic lately. We do have a supplemental appropriation here that we need to request, largely due to an increase in the number of children that we've had in foster care. We have, this year, kind of as a whole, we've had an average of about 40 more children in foster care as compared to last year, and that comes at a cost, unfortunately. So for the fiscal year 20, for the current year budget, we have about $4.17 million budgeted. Year-to-date expenses are roughly $5.3 million, and we are estimating approximately another $1.3 million in expenditures between now and June 30th. That brings the total projected expense to about $6.6 million. Good or bad news, however you want to look at it, the fiscal year 21 budget does include about $6.6 million budgeted for it. So if we're at a plateau, which hopefully we are, then hopefully we won't be back here next year doing this. But obviously we have no control over what happens with foster care. So with this in mind, we will need a supplemental appropriation of $2,424,500. Of that amount, approximately 30% is local, so about $727,000. That is local money. In order to fund this, I'm requesting that we transfer $500,000 from contingency and $227,000 in rebates and refunds that we've received in excess of budget. The biggest portion of that came from a refund that we got from last year's adult detention services. That was about $224,000 that we were not anticipating this year that we got back. I think that's it. Any questions?
You mentioned $500,000 from the contingency fund.
Yes, sir.
That's a very round number. So does that mean we haven't touched the contingency fund this year?
No, sir. I went back and looked through resolutions just to make sure, since I wasn't here, for the full year, and I did not see where we have appropriated anything from the contingency fund this year. The contingency fund balance is $515,000, a couple $100. I think it's $615 maybe. So, we can wipe that out and then take the rest of it from rebates and refunds, but I guess just to make me feel a little better, I'm gonna leave something in there, so, because we're not quite at the end of the year yet, but.
I understand.
Yeah.
All right. Any other questions? Yeah, that's not an ideal situation, obviously. But I'm not sure we have any options. So.
No, unfortunately not.
All right, I'll entertain a motion.
Mr. Chairman,
Yes, Mr. Johnson.
I move we adopt resolution R052620-05.
All right, you've heard the motion from Mr. Johnson. Mr. Johnson.
Yes.
Mr. Tuck.
Yes.
Mr. Scott.
Yes.
Mr. Davis.
Yes.
Mrs. Bainsley.
Yes.
Mrs. Parker.
Yes.
The chair votes yes. Motion carried. So no. Next, we have a consideration of a resolution authorizing a credit of $100,000 to Monumental Ironworks LLC for work completed at the former Thaxton Elementary School. Resolution R 052620-01, staff presentation by County Attorney Patrick Skelly.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Back when the school board decided to close Body Camp and Thaxton Elementary Schools, those properties were deeded over to the county. It's kind of a part of an economic development project. Monumental Ironworks, which was located in Lynchburg, was a lead, and a portion of that property, the Thaxton Elementary School property, was sold for $150,000, $50,000 down, with the understanding that they would enter into a performance agreement, which they did, to convert over the gym to a powder coat shop and move the remaining operations to Bedford County and create a minimum of 4 full-time jobs. They actually ended up having 14 full-time employees. So at this point, according to the terms of the agreement that the board approved back in December 2017, they are entitled to the credit of $100,000 and to release the existing deed of trust on the property to them.
May I ask, have they completed the additional monies for the purchase?
They paid $50,000 up front, yes.
All right. Any other questions?
I just have a comment.
Yes, Mr. Davis.
When I was running for election in this county and district, and I met folks who moved into the Thaxton area and told me they moved in there specifically for that Thaxton school, I just find it egregious that the Bedford County School Board closed that school, number one. And I think it's absolutely insane, the deal that the previous board made with Monumental Ironworks. I applaud Monumental Ironworks for being so wise and striking such a fabulous deal with, I just can't, the incompetency stooped so low in that deal. For them to only pay $50,000 for a school that could have been used for a school, and to my knowledge, no one in my area knew about it. And it just makes my blood boil, and I'm terribly embarrassed for our county for having made such a rotten deal. And I hope that as long as I'm on this board, we'll never make a mistake like that again.
Any other comments?
One last thing. If you intentionally tried to make a stupid deal, that was it.
Okay. All right, I'll entertain a motion.
Mr. Chair, since it's in District 7, keeping with the agreement that the former Board of Supervisors made, I really don't have any other choice but to approve this. So I'll make the motion to approve Resolution R052620-01.
All right, you've heard the motion from Mrs. Parker. Mrs. Parker?
Yes.
Mr. Scott?
Yes.
Mr. Davis?
Abstain.
Mrs. Bainsley?
yes,
Mr. Johnson?
Yes.
Mr. Tuck?
Yes.
The chair votes yes. Next, we have a consideration of a resolution recognizing, is that right? Yeah. Recognizing the militia within the county of Bedford pursuant to the Second Amendment to the United States Constitution, Article 1, Section 13 of the Constitution of the Commonwealth of Virginia, Resolution R 052620-03. Staff presentation by County Attorney Patrick Skelly.
Thank you again, Mr. Chair. Several weeks ago, staff was asked to compare some template or draft resolutions that would recognize the militia in Bedford County, as well as undergird some of the sentiments that the board may have regarding the rights of Bedford County citizens under the Second Amendment. The resolution that you have in front of you closely tracks what some of our neighboring localities, namely Campbell County, have adopted, and that is what is before you for consideration this evening.
All right.
And again, there's not a supervisory capacity under the resolution. It's strictly recognition of the Bedford County militia to the extent it exists.
All right, any other discussion?
Mr. Chairman.
Yes.
Are there any representatives of the Bedford County militia here this evening?
Let's see. I don't even know if they knew this was on the agenda. To be honest, I don't know who all they are, but. Oh, you won?
Yeah.
Okay. Did you know it was gonna be on the agenda?
No.
Yeah, I didn't think anybody did.
Would you be prepared to speak on?
No, I would not.
I guess, Mr. Chairman, that brings me to a question, is who's in charge of the Bedford County militia?
We're not, and that's all I think we need to know.
Have they given their consent over to Sheriff Miller, I suppose?
No, they haven't. And I guess my question is, have any of us talked, does anybody here talk to Sheriff Miller, or has the militia representatives talked to our sheriff?
Before they had their muster,
Right. Now,
then their representatives talked to Sheriff Miller, and I did as well.
Right. No, I don't think that, to my understanding, hadn't been any communication since then.
That I don't know, but, you know, when
I guess.
Mr. Sheriff Miller had some questions prior to the muster, after having talked to some representatives, and he felt a much greater comfort level. And that was good enough for me.
I feel like we're endorsing something that we don't know anything about. I haven't heard anyone say who's in charge of it, who's leading it. You know, maybe you can shine some light on that, or what the mission is. Is it an indication that we are looking for a backup for our own sheriff's department?
I think it's just a formal recognition that they have the right to exist. Virginia Constitution allows it, it's sort of laid out in the resolution.
So, I guess my question is, if 2 weeks from now we have another group that comes up and wants recognition as a Bedford militia, and I say that because I had 2 people tell me, when I asked them if they were going to the muster a couple months ago, they said no, they weren't part of that militia. They were involved with another group. So I don't know anything about the other group, but I do know that was the response I got. So I guess my question is, are we prepared to set a precedent so that we recognize everybody that comes before us that wants to be a militia?
I think anybody wants to, unless there's some constitutional reason why they can't own a firearm, I don't have issue with it.
So I'm thinking, if we set the precedents, are we setting it for extreme groups calling themselves militia? Not this group, but maybe on both sides of the spectrum, without naming any specific groups by name. But I think, are we setting ourselves up for recognizing some groups that we ordinarily would not want to recognize?
Mr. Chairman,
Yes.
Based on what you just said, and again, reading this over, I mean, to me, it appears that I would support this motion, this resolution.
Mr. Chair.
Yes.
After reading it, I don't see, if 10 militia groups formed in the county, we're not endorsing anyone, we're just saying they have the right to form a militia by the state constitution. And we're just saying they have that right, and we recognize that right. So I don't see where it matters if 1, 2, 3, or 4 come about. We're not endorsing one group over another. So I would be in favor of recognizing this group.
And they do spell out there, I mean, clearly what the purpose is here.
Yeah, and the reality is, if someone is doing something that breaks the law, then the sheriff's department will have to deal with that. But as long as somebody's not breaking the law, then I don't see where there's problems.
Will our sheriff's department be involved with this militia, in charge of it, or in any way?
I don't believe so.
I'd feel a lot more comfortable if we had somebody from the sheriff's department here giving their opinion on this.
I guess one of the reluctances that I heard from some was that we were reluctant to assume any liability, and a more, hey, they have a legal right, and I see this as a tool. And, you know, and it's from my perspective, this is a move on a chessboard. And we're playing chess with Richmond right now. And Richmond is trying to say, you can't do this. And we're saying, well, if they're part of the militia, these people can do this. And it gives them legal standing. If you're a citizen in Bedford County, you're a member of the Bedford militia, then you have legal standing to challenge any unconstitutional.
I don't disagree with any of that.
Richmond. And that's what I see this as. This is
I mean, I have no problem with that.
a legal
If
maneuver.
there being a militia here, what I question is where the Board of Supervisors' involvement with it is without the sheriff's representation. I'm not going to speak for the sheriff, but I did speak to the sheriff this morning, and I would feel a lot more comfortable if I had him here, if he was here to.
And I can appreciate that. I guess from my perspective and everything that I heard from a number of supervisors is they felt very comfortable as long as the Board of Supervisors was not assuming liability. And the more of a hands-on approach you take, then you start to assume some liability. So I think the arm's length approach is the better approach to avoid liability. So because that was a large number of the complaints or concerns that I received from citizens, where it was, is Bedford County going to assume some type of liability? With an arm's length approach, we do not assume liability. So,
Mr. Chair.
Mr. Chairman,
yes, Mrs. Bainsley.
I would just like to note that this resolution, I love the way it's written, because it just literally quotes the Constitution of the United States, the Constitution of Virginia, the Virginia Code. So this resolution is basically just saying we acknowledge all of these places in our Constitution that give people the right to form a militia. That's all it essentially does. It's not saying that our sheriff department is going to have anything to do with it. It's just simply acknowledging the constitutional right of citizens to form a militia. It's nothing that we're writing, it's already been written. We are just adhering to it and reaffirming it.
I would agree.
Yes.
All right. Any other discussion?
Mr. Chairman.
Yes, Mr. Todd.
I guess my concern with it is I am not against their Second Amendment or anything in there, but I feel like we've already affirmed a lot of this in our Sanctuary County resolution. As far as we were going to expend county resources to enforce unconstitutional laws, we recognize all able-bodied residents have Second Amendment rights and so forth and so on. I just can't get past the very top of the resolution says recognition. And you mentioned it gives them legal standing, and I'm not sure how that gives them legal standing from us, because they already have those rights. They're already enumerated in the Constitution. We're not giving them something that they don't already have. So I'm not convinced that we should get into this, to be honest. If somebody can find a way to pin some liability on us, they're going to find it. It reads pretty clean, but I've got a gut check on it, and I'm just not sure that we need to do this, as far as my opinion. And if one board can grant them this, another board can take it away. But it's a right in their Constitution. I can't give them something or more than what they already have on that. I have some anxiety about it.
Well, I guess I would respectfully disagree on a couple of points. One, I don't believe we're granting anything. I think they absolutely have the right, and I agree with you on that. However, some type of formal recognition does serve a purpose, and that purpose is we know when someone gets to court and challenges something, whether whatever level of court, one of the things that that a judge determines is, does this person have legal standing to challenge this? And if us having this resolution in place gives them greater legal standing so that it can't be tossed out when there's a challenge to an unconstitutional edict from Richmond, then I want to give them that ammunition to stand on. And so from that perspective alone, that's why I think this is important, because this formally recognizes, like Mrs. Bainsley rightfully said, we're not writing anything new here. It's all we're basically doing is pointing out the Virginia Constitution, the United States Constitution, and why they can do this. We didn't come up with it. We're not granting anything, and I don't think any future board can take it away. All we're doing is recognizing what already exists. But by doing it in a formal way, I think it gives them greater legal standing. And whether that's right or wrong, it certainly doesn't hurt.
Mr. Chairman,
Yes.
may we make a vote on this?
Yep. Are you calling for a vote?
I'll make the motion that we vote on this.
All right. So what's your?
I'm in favor of this resolution.
So you're
Yes.
making a motion to approve the resolution.
Ma'am.
All right. You've heard the motion from Mr. Davis. Mr. Davis?
Yes.
Mrs. Bainsley?
Yes.
Mrs. Parker?
Yes.
Mr. Scott?
Yes.
Mr. Johnson?
No.
Mr. Tuck?
No.
The chair votes yes. Motion carried. Next, we have consideration of an ordinance readopting emergency ordinance 050620-01. This would be ordinance 052620-07. Staff presentation, County Attorney Patrick Scales.
Thank you again, Mr. Chair. And just to be clear, this is not concerning any reopening, quote unquote, of our restaurants or businesses, that sort of thing. When we passed our emergency ordinance, the biggest concern was continuity of government and allowing some of the boards, or whichever boards and commissions would like to meet virtually in the interim. I know the DSS board has already called their next meeting to be held via WebEx, and what you have before you is simply an extension of the existing emergency ordinance to continue to allow those measures by the county government.
How long is this extension?
60 days to expire on July 4th.
I'm going to open this up. Any other? I'm going to open this up to discussion.
Days will be further out.
It's from the expiration of the current order.
Which is what?
June. Well, yeah, it would be further. It would be further. It would be August.
Yeah,
I'm not sure we have to go out that far, to be perfectly honest.
I was going to say, look, the only reason that would at all be interested in extending this, and it would only be for a very short window, would be because some board has already previously planned to do this. So if it's, say, within the next 30 days, but how long does our current resolution go until? That's my question.
June 5th.
Our current resolution
Current
goes,
resolution would expire June 5th, and we don't have another regular meeting until the 7th, I believe.
okay, so if our current resolution goes till June the 5th, I'd be willing to extend it to June the 30th. Just so if there's any upcoming meeting that's already been scheduled by some other board, not our board,
I know the DSS board has, that's the only one I'm aware of.
then, I don't want to create a new hardship on them to have to scramble. But beyond that, I think it's got to get back to normal business.
When is
So
the
that-
meeting?
Is-
I think it is the 16th. It's
Of
usually
June?
the second Thursday in June.
Okay.
Explain to me, I'm kind of drawing a blank. What does this got to do with whether they meet or not?
It enables them to use an electronic means rather than happen to meet in person. And since they've already planned to do that, now if they can't do that if we don't pass this resolution.
That's correct.
So it enables them, so it basically puts everybody on notice, look, we're not continuing this. Let's do this till the 30th of June, I think. That would be my opinion, but, I'll see what the consensus is, but,
Mr. Chair,
yes, Mrs.
I
Parker.
concur with that to the 30th of June. I think it's more than sufficient. We have already set the next meeting, WebEx or whatever. What we had already done that, so. But I'm curious to know the rest in here. Why do we need to extend the rest? Other than the meeting, we're extending. Seems like there's a lot of other things in there to extend.
Yeah, are we extending everything?
That's the way it's drafted, but again, those are mostly optional. If other boards, commissions, this board wanted to meet virtually or had to.
Yeah, I mean, I'm glad to see that I didn't have to call somebody to get in the building tonight. Yeah, that was nice.
My question is, if we don't extend it, what are they gonna do?
Or if we extend it, will we have an opportunity to extend it again if we need to?
We could if we needed to, because we're gonna have 2 meetings in June. I mean, I would say I'm not inclined to do that,
No,
but
if something happens,
if an emergency came up, obviously we'd have that option to do it.
What are they gonna do if we don't extend?
They're going to have a meeting in person.
put on masks and have a meeting.
I can't wear masks, I can't breathe through them.
I can't.
And I find it extremely ironic and insulting that our businesses that work, the citizens of this community and our businesses that work hard to pay the taxes and bear the burden of the financial costs of this community and provide jobs for everyone are not supposed to be operating. I suppose our governor has the gall to expect people that aren't working to pay taxes and to continue as usual. It's insanity and it's criminal. And I, for one, it makes my blood boil.
Before I vote, I just say I'd like not to extend it, let them be in person with the masks.
Like I said,
Say that again, please.
he's in favor of not extending it and just let them meet in person with a mask if they need to have a meeting.
If they want to wear a mask, then
Well, and I think the rule, and Patrick, correct me if I'm wrong, I mean, you really just have to have a quorum physically present. If there are members of certain committees or commissions and authorities who are older and part of the vulnerable population and, immunocompromised and don't feel comfortable attending, they can still call in and participate virtually. You just have to have a quorum physically present. I think that's correct.
I like that.
All right, so I'm gonna entertain a motion, but I have no idea where this is going right now. Because,
Mr. Chair,
yes,
I make a motion we do not extend it past June the 4th.
is it, are you just saying not to extend it? I don't know where it,
I was going to say, I think it might be even cleaner just if no one makes a motion, then the resolution doesn't carry and it expires by its own terms on June, I believe it's the 5th.
All right, then I'll withdraw my motion.
Board committee reports.
so, any motion on the floor? All right. No motion, we'll pass by that one. Next, we have board committee reports. Looks like we have none. Next is board comments. I know we have a big discussion coming up in a second.
Like our planning should agree.
What's that?
I have something I'd like to say that you not know.
Sure. This is board comments.
I was reading a little bit yesterday, and it was sad that folks were not able to gather and celebrate our veterans on Memorial Day. And I think it's especially important that we take a moment, I'm not asking for a moment of silence, but I think we all need to remember what happened on June 6, 1944. hope I have the year correct, when the Bedford boys were part of the casualties on the beaches of Normandy, and how bravely they served. And I think also in our county, we need to make sure that we maintain some spine against this gutless Governor Northam and his reducing our freedoms. And I certainly, for one, intend to oppose in what ways I can.
Mr. Chairman?
Yes.
I'd just like to point out also that we've got more recent history. We have 12 young men from Bedford County that died in Vietnam.
They're the ones you listed on Facebook.
All right, any other comments? All right, next we have board appointments, which looks like we have none. County Attorney's report.
Mr. Chair, our last meeting, I did indicate that action will be taken regarding the landfill. I do have the complaint drafted for that. I was just waiting for some final input from staff, but I do anticipate that being filed within a week. So just want to let you all know that that probably will garner some media attention. I would just suggest that any comments.
Be directed to you.
Yes, sir.
That's what you're there for. That's why we pay you the big bucks. All right. County Administrator report, discussion regarding the CARES Act funding allocation, or anything else if you have something else.
Yeah, I got one other thing first, but still coronavirus related. Just kind of give an update as to a couple things. As of today, Bedford County has had a cumulative total of 43 cases, or what I like to look at is the number of cases per capita, which is 55 per 100,000 people cumulatively over the last 2.5 months. And we haven't had a whole lot of cases over the last week and a half, quite frankly. So virtually all of our buildings are open in some form or fashion. After the Board of Supervisors adopted their resolution asking the governor to start to reopen the economy and also to do so and also consider a regional approach. Ever since that was accomplished by the Board of Supervisors, the staff has been planning to open the county facilities as soon as phase 1 opened. And a little bit to Mr. Davis's point is that, we took the approach that if the private sector was going to be able to be open, the majority of the private sector is going to be able to be open, then we need to be open too for in-person visitation and business, just as our stores and other businesses are able to do so as well, and still do so in a healthy and productive way. Now, our staff, particularly the staff of our building maintenance and staff and custodian and Sheldon Cash and his team, they did a great job in terms of in some of our offices and installing the different tape lines so we can maintain the appropriate distancing. We put up some plexiglass sneeze guards or cough guards, whatever you want to call it, in a couple different offices, which I think was a relief to some of our employees as well, to safeguard them. We've enhanced our cleaning of our buildings. We've changed the schedule of some of our custodians so they can be more present more often, and they've adapted well to that so far and been willing to do that with their schedules, which has been helpful in terms of keeping our buildings more clean. We've done a good job of distributing face coverings and other protective equipment to our staff, to make them feel comfortable and safe as well. Hand sanitizer, you can find that everywhere. We still have a number of employees working from home and telecommuting, and that's worked out really well. I've encouraged that, at least for the time being, and that's going to continue. The whole thing kind of changed slightly as of today with the governor's press conference, but our approach with face coverings, at least for our buildings, was that we certainly encourage citizens to wear face coverings when interacting with our employees, but we don't require it. But I did ask for our frontline workers they may want to highly consider wearing face coverings if they wanted to. So anyways, I think we've taken a lot of good health safeguards to allow for a healthy and safe environment for our citizens to conduct business in our county buildings, but also so our employees are feeling safe as well. Most of our like I said, most of our buildings are open in some form or fashion. I know Ms. Bansley and I exchanged a couple emails last week about the libraries, and I heard from our library director today that they're going to take a little bit more aggressive approach in terms of getting their buildings reopened. They were busy last week in terms of their pickup and drop off. I think they had over 2,000, I think, across the system. Pickup of books, I think, so that's a lot in 1 week. But they're gonna be more aggressively looking at accelerating their opening of their facilities. I'm not exactly sure when that is. Library director just said that in the upcoming days they'll release a plan about that. So really, I mean, in terms of the first week of the county government just being reopened for in-person business, and we were never closed officially. I mean, we were still doing business every day during this entire pandemic. But at least in terms of being open to the public, there was less foot traffic in most of our buildings. Citizens still seem to be utilizing some of the tools that we implemented over the last couple months that they were using to conduct county business, so they're still continuing to do that. Some of those are high-tech, quote unquote, utilizing website programs and so forth. Some of them are low-tech, just in terms of drop boxes and different buildings that citizens are using, so they can come up, put stuff in a drop box and go on about their business, and instead of having to come and wait in line and talk to people. But I think it's going along pretty well. Parks and Recreation, we've opened up our shelters, our playgrounds, a skate park. All those facilities are at least reopened for people to use casually. We're not taking reservations for groups of 7,500 people for reunions and church groups yet, but whenever we enter into a further phase, I'm sure we'll get back into that. But anyways, that's just kind of where we are with the county government, just in terms of our buildings is physically reopening for the public. And the courthouse has reopened, and some of their courts are starting to get more, schedule more cases and have more activity in the courthouse as well. So anyways, that's just an update, just to kind of let you know where we are. And I will say that it was interesting, I was on a conference call with almost 40 different city and county managers this afternoon that VACO put on, and they asked me to kind of give what I just told you as a little update. And I will say that we were fairly ahead of the curve, at least in the group that we were talking to. In fact, most of the folks, most of the counties aren't opening until next week or even mid-June, which I just kind of said that wasn't part of our decisions here. Were some community norms and what some expectations are, and that led a lot into our decision making as well, and what the expectations of our citizens are. So that played a lot into what we did. But anyways, our staff responded well, I think, and so far they're doing well. Transitioning, but still coronavirus related, the CARES Act. I sent out a memo to the board late last week, trying to summarize the best I could, whatever it is, 25 different pages of frequently asked questions and guidance and regulations. I tried to distill it down into 2. So anyways, to summarize this for public consumption and for us to have a little bit more discussion going down the road is, the CARES Act was highly publicized kind of stimulus money for the federal government. Over $3 billion was given to the state, and the governor decided to give a certain percentage or portion of that to the localities based on our proportional share of population. So that means that for Bedford County's share of the CARES Act funding is almost $6.9 million. So a couple notes about that is that, we need to give a certain amount of, or allocate a certain amount of funds to the town of Bedford. If we did that based on a population estimate, that'd be $542,845. And that would be a part that we would still hold, but if the town of Bedford wanted to get reimbursed for some expenditures, they could apply for some reimbursements through the county. and I think that's an important note, is that the fiscal agent or the fiscal responsibility of this $6.9 million is this board in this room. So at the end of the day, the proverbial buck has to stop somewhere, and for our $6.9 million, the buck has to stop with the Board of Supervisors. At the end of this period, we'll have to account for what we've spent our money on, whether it's for the county government or other community needs. Some other just basic rules about this funding, kind of at a very high level, is that we have to spend expenditures through this CARES Act have to be made by December 30th. And so whatever we don't spend has to be returned back to the state. That's not necessarily a bad or a good thing, it's just what the rule is, and that's what they say. I'm not sure if there's anyways, it's up to the locality how we want to do that or accomplish that. Another rule is that these are supposed to be for obviously coronavirus related outcome measures or in response to coronavirus time and monies that we have spent or a local government has spent. Also, the expenditures should not have been, you can't reimburse yourself for expenditures that were already in the existing budget. So so a good example of that would be, let's say we have a EMT or paramedic that goes on call for ends up being a coronavirus patient. Well, that EMT and paramedic are already scheduled to work. So that's something that's already budgeted. We can't get reimbursed for that time.
Would this coronavirus cause us to have to do something like shut down the landfill or?
No. Well, we have thought about that a little bit due to the extra volume of waste that we've had to dispose of, and that's might be a stretch, but it might be something worthwhile discussing.
Well, the reality is a lot of localities have experienced that. I mean, in fact, I read an article specifically related to that, so it gave me confirmation that we were not the only locality experiencing an increase in volume of trash. I think it's sort of a phenomenon of people staying home.
It is. And it did cost us money. There's no doubt about it in terms of a number of things. So anyways, we have to look at that. Another rule that is that we cannot use this money for revenue shortfalls. I mean, if there's another stimulus fund or whatever you want to call it from the federal government, I know there's been talk about that in the House of Representatives and so forth. Whatever the, putting any political stance aside, we cannot use this fund for any revenue shortfalls. Also, we're just encouraged, it's not mandated, but it's encouraged to use this money for one-time expenses and not for ongoing operations. That kind of makes sense if we have to finish up our work by the end of December. And of course, whatever we don't spend, we have to return back to the state. There is a good bit of flexibility as to what we can use these funds for. A good bit of it can be used for just county government and town government and school related expenses that are directly tied to COVID response. But also there is some creativity that can be utilized in order to get some of this money out into the community. There are a number of local governments have already established small grant programs for small business relief, and that'd be something that could be eligible if we wanted to do a program such as that. And anyways, there's a lot of possibilities. This isn't, in other words, this isn't like your typical FEMA grant that is just used for whatever that disaster is. This can also be used to help the private sector, and you can even get down into the weeds and go into individual level if we were prepared to do that.
What do we need to do? Do we need to decide whether or not we're going to accept this?
Well, we had a deadline, and John and I had some long conversations about this last week, and as uncomfortable it may have been to meet that deadline, we had to send in a certification by last Friday, so we went ahead and sent that in. So we will receive these funds probably sometime in the first week of June, and then we have to establish a program as to what
Well,
we're
we've got a lot of
spend
time.
for.
It's got to be done by the end of December.
So at the end of the day, I mean, really, my two final points will be, then we can have a little discussion if we want. My two final points would be that we have $6.9 million, and I have no, from a public sector, just from a public sector, talking about schools, town, county, so to speak, and we're not gonna spend $6.9 million unless the sky falls on coronavirus-related expenses. I'm not exactly sure what that will end up being, but I have to think it would be certainly less than 2 as to what we would ultimately end up spending. It could be less than 1. So there is opportunities to do something else other than just public sector reimbursements. The other thought I had was that, yes, we do need to get working on this and start putting some parameters and guidelines around what we want to spend the money on and what that might look like. And I thought that would be a good use of one of our committees, like perhaps the finance committee might be one of the better ones, since this is financial related, in order to kind of vet and establish sort of a program, and I kind of like to say guardrails as to what we want to spend the funds on, and then through the finance committee, we present a report to the whole board to establish a program as to what we want to do with these.
Mr. Chairman,
Yes.
here from me, as a business owner myself, maybe the only small business owner in this group besides Mr. Scott here, I would like to be included in that discussion if I may.
Well, and that's one of the things I was this is a good opportunity for the community building, and it would be good to have some extra voices at the table that may not be individuals that or entities that we communicate with on a regular basis, just to get some other ideas and feedback and input.
Whatever we do, we gotta do it quickly.
Going back to the schools, we don't know what's gonna happen with the schools. And one of the biggest concerns we're hearing right now is the internet for Bedford County. And I'm under the impression, I don't care what other people say, we're gonna have a lot of people in Bedford County that's not gonna be able to pick up internet from these towers, because there's a lot of little bumps all over Bedford County that's people live in. And I mentioned in the last couple of meetings that we need to already be studying about these repeaters and stuff that's gonna put internet back into these hollows and stuff. And if these schools gonna need internet county-wide, then this might be an opportunity to, because the kids have to stay home, to use some of these funds to get on the board about putting that repeaters and stuff in. But as slow as we've been putting the broadband in, I don't think we can wait to study this. I think we need to find somebody that says, hey, we can do it, we can do it this way and get it done.
And I agree. Mr. Hiss and I had that discussion, because that I think is excellent use. We already knew ahead of time with the Blue Ridge Tower project that we were going to need to go back with some backfill with some shorter towers. But I have my concerns that it can be done in a timely fashion. So one of the questions that I asked Mr. Hiss was, talk to George Condelis and find out, can this be done? And let's plan to do that.
Would those towers have to be built by the end of the year, or just paid for by the end of the year, or contracted by the end of the year?
That's a good question.
Yeah, that's a good question. I mean, we'll probably learn more about that, but my understanding is that we have to have paid for it.
We might have to build these daggone back towers before we build the real towers.
Well, I mean, I think Mr. Sharp's question or point earlier is that I think we can certainly, it can be done. The challenge will be siting them on people's property. It ends up being a real estate. In terms of actually constructing these smaller towers, it's really not that big a deal.
Well, we're going to have a little money to work with now.
Oh, yeah.
And so, because the reality is, it sounded like that would fall within this because of the need for telework and remote and distance learning. The internet infrastructure is, in light of those things, it's even more important than it ever was. I mean, it was already important, and we were already behind the curve in Bedford County. And this is an opportunity to to really try to push that along, get this done. If we can get this infrastructure in place, that's going to be good for our citizens, not only for COVID-19, but for years to come in the future. So, as I understand it, another locality in Virginia is already planning on doing something similar with their funds, and so.
Well, it's not only the schools, we've got people that have to work from home now because.
That's correct.
They need internet too.
That's right. So,
And my understanding is that this isn't, what we're discussing right here is an eligible project.
so, yeah, I mean, I'm all for, no matter what this committee wants to do, let's get this done,
Yeah.
right? And I would think that the consensus of this board would be that that is a legitimate use of these funds. And
I think both of the ones mentioned, I mean, small business stimulus packages or grants or whatever you want to call them, I think, and the broadband are two that.
yeah, because from what I understand, our expenses for PPE and maybe we're going to have some additional testing and things that are going to be required at the nursing home, a few things like that. But beyond that, we're not going to, county directly, we're not going to have large expenses. We're not anticipating it. But something like this is a legitimate use of those funds, the way they see it. And
I
I
like
think
that
it
he
would be,
said creative. I've heard the word creative.
Mr. Chair, in light of the fact that BRT has promised to have the towers finished by August, we have plenty of time to know the areas that will be open and not those hollows Mr. Scott pointed out where we need to put those repeaters in. So we're anxiously looking forward to BRT finishing that project in August, and we'll fill in the gaps after that. That's great.
well, I think we probably need to identify those locations.
I think we
Now.
I think you might identify some of them before the picture.
Yeah, be able to start identifying after the middle of June.
And we'd like to, go ahead and get that out to bid. So
They're estimating, about 30.
let's get her done.
What's the expense?
About 30.
Mr. Chair?
Yes.
What cost?
I would just like to point out as well that Arlington, the county of Arlington, I was reading, is using some of their CARES Act funding to help some families who cannot afford the installation fee. So there's installation fees once we have the towers up. And so the kids that go to school that need the internet, but the parents can afford the installation fees, they are using that CARES Act. So that might be something that this committee would look into.
Yeah, I think anything to get it out there to the community, the better. We're not paying for anybody's monthly service.
Right, we just need to make sure that every child has, if they can't go to school in the fall, what can we do to make sure that every child has internet service?
Some of the localities are using the assisted lunch qualifications as being paid.
Well,
Where do you hear this 30?
In one of our meetings.
Well, I will say you need to keep in mind that not every child is is in the public school. There's some that are private school that can't go to school also. We need to keep those in mind. Even homeschool kids that may not have internet access. So and quite frankly, any citizens that need to be able to work from home. I mean, so I'm not sure if we would necessarily use a means test for, say, public, or free lunch program. I would just say, if somebody asks for it, unless there's some compelling reason to say no, I'd say we help out. But anyway, we can figure all that out later.
I just really wanted the board to know.
We have the options. We don't have to spend it, but we have the option.
Are there any strings attached?
As far as the restrictions on how you use
No,
them.
I just mean, are we beholden to Richmond on
To the
this?
crown.
These are federal dollars.
Yeah, these are federal pass-through dollars. So the answer is no.
Okay.
It's just, I don't think there is. I mean, every county got a proportional share, and I've talked to some of my other colleagues throughout the region, and to Mr. Sharp's point, we're just in terms of actual county government expenses, I mean, hardly any of us are gonna spend, even come close to spending our full allocation just on reimbursing ourselves. So there's an ample opportunity, I'll use the word again, to be creative in order to get some projects completed and get some money out into the community and help some of our businesses. I think one of the things that were neat, that was specifically cited in here, and this goes into small businesses too, is payments to farmers who had to facilitate a kind of a livestock depopulation program. I don't know how much of that happened here, but there might be some that had to do that, I'm not sure. But there's other farming assistance that could be utilized through this fund also. So that's farmers are business people too, so that's a good thing.
Yeah.
Think back to the impact on the landfill with all the masks going in there.
Yeah, no doubt. No doubt.
They're all being sterilized, Vicky.
I feel pretty certain if we don't close that landfill, the virus is gonna be in there.
All right. Next.
And Mr. Chair, I would like the committee to also consider the food bank. I'm sure that the food bank, their stock is way down after this pandemic. So if we have this money that we can help restock our food banks, that would be a great use of the funds.
Yeah, if that's.
I think it is, to Mrs. Bainsley's point, I think that there is specific language in here about food delivery programs to citizens in need. So I think that would be something that would be eligible. So that's a good reminder.
Okay. All right. Anything else, board information? We have the Bedford Regional Water Authority Board meeting minutes and the Bedford communications calls. Calendar reminder says our next meeting is June the 8th, and it's going to be a work session beginning at 5 p.m. and then a regular meeting at 7 p.m. on June the 22nd.
It was June, just to let you know, we'll have to figure out some meeting logistics. That meeting on June 22nd will have a couple of zoning hearings, and we expect to have a number of people here for those hearings. So we'll have to think about how we do all that. We'll make it work.
Better take vitamin D before they show up.
Well,
Yes.
I guess well, we can discuss it later, but
And we might be in phase 2 by then with the governor.
well, I just look at it as they're better off being in here than standing room only out in the hall. I'm just glad we got the Second Amendment ordinance done before the coronavirus, because we'd have been in some big trouble.
That's right.
All right. So June 8th and June 22nd. I guess I'll entertain a motion to adjourn this meeting, keeping in mind that we have a broadband authority meeting right after. So don't run off. All right, you've heard the motion from Mr. Tuck to adjourn this meeting. All those in favor say aye. Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? All right, we're adjourned.
Meeting here or there?
I think we're going to meet.
We're gonna, have you guys go across the hall